Please join me in welcoming Mr. Elliff, Mr. Flores, Mr. Greer, and Ms. Rue. Thank you for being here. Before we begin, as a backdrop against which we'll have this conversation, let me offer you a few statistics which I grabbed helpfully from the Texas Tribune's Public Schools database. Northwest ISD is recognized by the state. The other schools, districts represented up here are rated academically acceptable. The largest district, not only the largest represented here on the stage, but the largest in the state, is Houston, with more than 200,000 students. Corpus has about 38,000 by the numbers that I've seen. Harlingen has about 18,000. Northwest has about 14,000. Northwest students perform above the state average in passing the TOX test, sort of no longer a relevant conversation as we transition away, but for purposes of discussion, they are above the state average. Houston's perform at the state average. The other two perform below the state average. A majority of Northwest students are college ready in the English language, arts, and math. The other three districts, fewer than half are college ready in those subjects. Houston spends the most per student for academic functions, about $5,400 per student, and for all school functions, about $9,200 per student. Harlingen spends $4,800 and $8,300, Northwest $4,700 and $8,400, Corpus $4,600 and $8,200. And then finally, demographics. Houston's student population is 62% Hispanic, 27% African American, and 8% white. Northwest is 73% white, 17% Hispanic, 7% African American. Corpus, 77% Hispanic, 15% white, 5% African American. Harlingen, 90% Hispanic, 9% white, 1% African American. So we're dealing with very different districts, but four accomplished leaders of these districts. And so I want to engage you all in the broad discussion first of the state of things in your districts. Mr. Elliff, will go first with you. Can you talk about what challenges you face, particularly to your district, or maybe more generally to public education right now, whether it's the kind of students you're encountering in the classroom, money, politics, whatever you think. What would you say?
Well, finance has been a big challenge for us this year, maybe not as big as it has in some of the other districts because of just the context of where we are, but we have been able to achieve some efficiencies by closing schools. We've reduced athletics. We've cut about 5% of our staff district-wide. So that has been a challenge for us.
So for you, the cut from the state has been real. It has had real consequences.
Correct. We've got $16 million that we cut out of our budget this last year.
Yeah.
And so finance is a challenge. Our demographics are shifting as well, particularly as it relates to socioeconomic status of our students. We see many more students of poverty, about 70% in our district that we're trying to be successful with. So those two issues, the changing demographics in our district and the financial challenges have been big for us.
Now, Ms. Rue, I gather that you have a slightly different issue with regard to poverty. You have a lot of rural schools and a lot of rural families feeding in your district.
That's true, we do. Yeah. The district is a fast-growing district, and one of our biggest challenges has been to manage our growth. In this last biennium, the district's grown just a little shy of 3,000 students, and our budget overall has been cut $22 million.
Right. And that 3%, again, we said that your district has about 14,000 students?
Actually, we are just about 200 shy of 18,000 students
I'm sorry,
now.
18,000. So, but growing 3,000 as a percentage of the overall, that's a huge percentage.
We are settling into an annual 8.5% to 9% growth.
Yeah.
In our heyday, about 4 years ago, we were at 14% and 19% growth.
But again, despite that, you've cut your budget significantly.
Oh, absolutely. Our budget stair steps down from the previous biennium as we acquired new students. And our challenge has been opening the new schools. We opened 2 new schools last year.
Yep.
We did it without hiring the roughly 150 to 200 staff across the board that we would have hired. We did it without any additional staff at all. But
class size has gone up then?
Absolutely.
What's the average class size at the various levels, if you know it?
We staff on a 150 to 1 at the secondary level, and we staff at a 24 to 1 on the elementary level.
24 to 1. Mm-hmm. And those are both up from what it used to be.
And we do waivers.
Indeed. Mr. Elliff, have you had to increase your class size as well?
We did. At secondary 6 through 12, we increased our class size this past year.
Ms. Rue, besides the growth and the fact that you've had to cut the budgets, which I assume others have had to do as well, what else are the big challenges right now that you face in that district?
I think responding to the world that our kids live in. You know, if you take it down to a student level, as our kids come in the door, they are expecting to be able to acquire information and use tools in their classroom setting that they're familiar with, and the way they respond to each other.
They want to learn the way they live.
That's exactly right. So having the resources in our classrooms to make that happen is certainly a challenge. And
again, with less money, it's harder to provide those resources.
That's right.
Mr. Flores, down in Harlingen, what's it like for you? What's it been since the cuts, and what are the big challenges you face?
It's been, again, it's very real, obviously. $5.3 million for the biennium, $5.3 million for us meant about 26 teachers at the high school, 22 at the elementary, and about 40 additional staff. But it also, and one of the things, just to piggyback off Karen, was the technology allotment for us, a $600,000 decrease. So what we had to do was do replacement from 4-year cycles to 6-year cycles. And what we just talked about, the exponential growth of technology, and having our children, I believe, I don't really see a lot of I see them more as opportunities rather than challenges. One of the things that we do in Harlingen CISD with 90% Hispanic population, 78, 79%, this year will probably be about 80% economically disadvantaged. What we want to do is just provide a quality school district that allows for an understanding early literacy. And one of the things that we're going to really hone in on and our charge for this legislative session, I hope, is to advocate for early literacy and other things like that. Because, and it's ironic, we have two students, two of my students, I told them I wouldn't do it to them, but I'm going to have them stand up. Drew Mulder and Ethan Bettis, 2 students from Harlingen, are students here now who just graduated.
And these are students who are enrolled?
They were the class of 2012. So they Drew just took his first test yesterday. He looks a little bit more relieved, but Ethan as well. So these are 2 students. So these are the faces of Harlingen. So basically, I think that epitomizes what you asked. What is our challenge? Our challenge is not to have a deficit mentality, but an abundance mentality. We're all students that, given the opportunity, given the word gap, we often talk about achievement gaps, and that's rightfully so. But I think it's more important to talk about opportunity and word gaps. I mean, there's some significant research, mid-80s, 90s, and so on to this day, that talk about a 32 million word gap by age 4 for a student of poverty and a student from an advantaged background. So when you correlate that, what does that mean? That means schools have to start earlier. We have to then create a collective impact with others, because it's not just the school, it's the chambers, it's our business community. We all have to have a collective impact to make this change go, so that we have students just like this.
Now, to Ms. Roost's point, dealing with a fast-growing district, we know that some of the great population growth in the state has happened in the Valley. So as your population in the Valley grows, in theory, the enrollments in your schools are growing. What are you doing to try to meet that growth head on?
Well, we're trying to be very innovative. We know that schools, we do know that the expectations are different, that schools cannot continue to do things. We cannot teach children the way we learned. We must find ways to meet their needs in this changing world. And so what we try to do is try to be not as innovative as possible, as innovative as allowable. Because you can't go in and say, okay, here's what we're going to do, and I applaud McAllen, one-to-one iPad initiative. Technology rollout for us is responsible for us in the sense of digital classrooms rather than 160, starting with 20, hoping next year 60, and so on and so forth. So we got to scale that, but always making sure that we give opportunities for our students to make sure that they understand that it's not a deficit being from Harlingen. In fact, just a quick story. When I first got to Harlingen 4 years ago, one of the things, I have OnStar. So I have a Chevrolet, and on my OnStar said, Harlingen, Texas. Okay, they routed me to Arlington. What I want our kids to do is to realize that being from Harlingen is really the gateway, and with the demographic shift that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, it's really a value add, not a deficit in abundance.
I like that as a Harlingen, the gateway to Arlington. That's actually nice. I like that. I see it on the sign, actually. Now, Mr. Greer, in some ways, these are smaller districts. You're a huge district, appropriate because Houston is the largest city in the state of Texas, 4th largest in the country. So I suspect that the challenges that you're facing are not exactly the same as these guys are, but maybe so. But where are you in terms of the most important challenges you're facing since these cuts?
It's interesting. We believe that the most important challenge we face is a challenge around human capital. We believe that we need to have an effective teacher in every classroom in Houston, not just in some classrooms.
Yep.
We believe that we need to have a really strong school leader in every school versus just in some schools.
Yep.
And the challenge to find that talent is daunting. Our colleges and universities, quite frankly, just aren't producing the quality of teacher that we think our children deserves. And that's a huge, huge issue for us. Last year in Houston, we very quietly replaced over 500 low-performing teachers. And you know, it's not something we're particularly, that we stand up and shout about,
Right.
but it's something that's necessary from time to time.
Did you get pushback from the community of teachers who said, wait a minute, you're running over us with a bulldozer here?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we treated people with respect and dignity. Yeah. We got some pushback from the union, yes. We also got pushback from some communities. We reconstituted 9 schools where all the teachers had to reapply. Yep. And we fired all the principals and assistant principals in those schools. They were really low-performing schools that you would not want your children to attend. Yeah. And so that's a huge challenge for us in our school district. Another challenge is, quite frankly, teaching children to read. And that's an issue in Houston, and how we particularly teach children to read who speak another language other than English as their first language. A lot of people don't realize this, but Houston is one of the, if not the largest site-based decision-making district in the Americas, maybe in the world. We give our principals money. Basically, we say, here's your pot of money. You now tell us how you want to spend it. And I have high schools with 8, 9 assistant principals and no guidance counselors, because that's what the principal decided. Right. I have a high school that will on purpose have 50 kids in an Algebra 1 classroom because that principal thinks that this Algebra 1 teacher is a superstar, and all of these children, 45, can benefit from this teacher versus 25 from this teacher and 25 from this below average teacher. Right. And so we make those kinds of purposeful decisions in Houston. Now, we've lost $126 million in the last 2 years.
Right, your cut is a little bit larger.
I would say it's a little bit different. I was thinking $5 million, wouldn't that be nice? But the other piece is, I've been there again since 2009. We eliminated 700 central office positions, and we didn't do it because of state budget cuts.
You did it because it was the thing to do.
We did it because it was the management thing to do, and we redirected the money to support initiatives that would help us. Right. Our dropout rate, we've cut from 22.8% down to 11.5%. Our graduation rate jumped from 22.5% to 78.5%. The amount of college scholarships the year before I went there was $74 million offered to seniors. Yep. Last year we had $180 million worth of college scholarships offered to seniors. The number of advanced placement courses taken and the number of kids scoring 3 or higher has tripled in the last 3 years. We pay for all of the AP exams. We pay for all of the international baccalaureate exams because our kids are poor, and if we're 82% free and reduced lunch. So if we didn't do that, our kids that we want to have a more rigorous education wouldn't participate in those courses.
And you've had to find the money despite the austerity we've talked about, and you've done it by figuring out where else in the budget you can take money away from and apply it to those things.
We have, and I'm not going to sit here and say it hasn't hurt us to lose that money. I mean, we go on fewer field trips. That hurts kids from disadvantaged backgrounds not to have those kinds of exposures. Our class sizes, like everyone else's, are certainly up. But given the discretion that we give our principals, we also have fewer clerks. And we have a lot fewer central office positions. And, you know, we have, I believe, I know we have the best bus transportation system in the country. And I'd say that to anyone. We're very green as a district. We provide transportation in Houston to KIPP and YES charter schools. And we make money doing it, and they save money. We're that efficient. This year, we're one of 4 finalists for the Broad Award in education. And I'm very proud of our team for working together as a team to try to help figure all of this out.
So efficient financially and entrepreneurial, and I think that's an interesting model. I think what Mr. Greer said, Ms. Rue, about the difficulty of hiring quality faculty and administrators, teachers and administrators, is a problem that I suspect each of you sees. Can you talk a little bit about that? Has that been a problem in your world these days?
Well, I guess I would tell you that for our district, it hasn't been as much a problem given the economics of the region and the fact that people are seeking employment. So from that aspect, we have benefited. Our biggest challenge is bringing people in as we open our new schools and we acclimate and provide the staff development that's necessary to keep up with the really rigorous curriculum that we have developed over the last few years. That's been a huge challenge. I think that a very good point was made about the human capital and the quality of the principal and what happens in your schools as a base of that.
Right.
And our focus has been in developing principals. We have spent quite a bit of time over the last 4 years with a very concentrated staff development, professional development around the role of the principal within a systemic approach, the role of the principal in not that instructional leadership component, but in helping students and teachers see the value of effort, see the value of rigor, of challenging themselves and accepting those. The community that I'm in is 234 square mile district comprised of all our parts of 14 different municipalities. We go from Fort Worth, 52% of our enrollment lives inside the city of Fort Worth, to Trophy Club on one end, which is a suburban community, to Rome, Aurora, and Newark, which are small rural communities within the system. So our challenge has been to provide a way for the leaders within our system to understand how to help students get past a thought of my effort either doesn't matter or this isn't in the ballpark for me. This isn't in my future. And beginning to help children understand what that means for their own potential. That's where we have focused a lot of our effort around the types of teachers we hire and more specifically around the professional development we've done with principals.
Mr. L, if I'm hearing Ms. Roos say, maybe focusing on principals is a little bit more important than focusing on teachers. That the administrative piece is really important as it sets the tone for the entire district.
We figure that the 60 principals in our campus serve, in our district serve as sort of a funnel. Everything the information, the philosophy, everything that comes at our campuses from our district offices, from TEA, from the community as a whole, all get filtered through those principals. And so really strong leadership there on each campus is very, I mean, it's essential. So we too spend a lot of our time and energy in the development of strong campus leaders. You know, I think probably every district in the state that's having trouble finding high quality teachers to bring into vacancies would tell you that math and science are two areas where it's difficult to find teachers. But as far as our current core of teachers in our district, and I think both Terry and Karen alluded to this a moment ago, a challenge is helping all of our current teachers understand that in 2012, it's not about teaching students everything you know, it's about teaching them how to learn everything they can. Because the truth is, students can Google more than their teacher knows, and the students know it. So really creating that shift of mind on the part of our teachers, that their role has completely changed because of students' access to technology and use of technology and understanding of ways to get more information than one teacher could possibly impart in a classroom. That's the way to create an engaging, enriched sort of environment for kids. And that's a tough sort of thing to get to when you really have to get teachers to think about changing their craft. It's a challenge.
Well, you know, philosophically, Mr. Flores, what I think Mr. Olive is saying is that the kids you're teaching, educating today are not the same kids as 5 years ago or 10 years ago. You know, 10 is the new 16, right? The maturity level, the sophistication level, and the awareness or engagement level of the kids you have now in elementary, middle school is far advanced, is it not, from what it was just a few years ago?
That's true, and going along that continuum, if you look at it, there's those who say that students today aren't, let me go back, because students today, kindergarten, students that came in a month ago, they are the graduates of the class of 2025. And I just want to point that out because they're going to change careers, not jobs, careers 3 to 6 times in their lifetime, careers. So what does that mean? That means we are preparing students in kindergarten today for jobs that don't even exist. So what it does come back to, and Mr. Greer and others have stated, it is human capital. And I just want to give a shout out to Texas teachers, because I think Texas teachers have for so long, because of whatever happens at the policy level, they get inundated with the fact that no effective reform at the highest level. Yeah. Regardless of the great plans that can emanate from any superintendent, any principal, it has to be carried out with a daily quality instruction every day. So a shout out to teachers in this state. Yeah. And in our particular area, we're really unique in that it's very regional. How a guy from San Angelo got to be, by way of Dallas, by way of Round Rock, by way of Pflugerville, got to be in the Rio Grande Valley, I don't know. Because I can tell you. Right,
OnStar, that's exactly
got
right.
me there.
Very good, Mr. Ella.
But
exactly
really,
right.
To finish that point, I didn't realize that, but how 75 to 80% of our teachers will come from UTB and UTPA. Yeah. Why that's important, we have a collective impact group working right now with 8 superintendents, FSG, as well as Educate Texas and others who we meet monthly. So they're asking, how do we get students more prepared for college? And we're asking, how do we get teachers more prepared for the students of today? So it's a great dynamic that I don't think exists anywhere in the United States with that group of
But Mr. Flores, the kind of partnerships you're talking about weren't necessary, or maybe didn't exist just a few years ago, and in some ways they're born of the necessity of the difficulty of the situation, right, Ms. Rue?
Absolutely. We do not do this alone. We've got 4 core beliefs in our district, and one of those is that the education of our children is a shared responsibility. Yeah. And I do want to say that I think Texas teachers are bar none the finest anywhere. Yeah. And yes, there's challenge in staffing, and yes, there's challenge in finding people at times to fill certain roles. But what I watch, what I see is our teachers who are eager to learn, to shift, to think about who the kids are. I often tell people I just had a new grandson born last year. First one. And that little fellow, I am sure of it, was born with a USB port hanging from his mouth.
Well, right, seriously. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, just
he's on Facebook right now, actually.
Right, absolutely. So our kids understand that in their world, and I can tell you anecdote after anecdote, information is a commodity that is free to all. Nobody needs to go out and buy information. They can find it. What we must do, and what we find our teachers doing, is developing learning experiences, which is a whole lot different than writing a lesson plan. Right. That gets the kids involved, interested, willing to problem solve, trying to push themselves a little harder. You know, we have felt for years that we were kind of turning a battleship in a bathtub, because we were working through, how do you do that? How do you get kids to get up in the morning and say, let me at it, I'm ready, I want to go. Yep. And we're slowly seeing that change. And I'll give you one statistic that I'm particularly proud of. Yes. And it's in Algebra 1. A couple of years back, we cut every algebra classroom in half. We put a table in the center, and we staffed it. We put 15 students max in that classroom, a teacher at the end with a digital platform. We said, look in the whites of their eyes and make sure they understand. When we started that, some of our lowest performing kids in student populations were in the 50s and 60s, and today they're all in the high 80s. Yep. It makes a difference in how teachers address and design what they want their kids to do. So I just praise them over and over again.
Right. I also think that the level of sophistication, I agree with Steve and Karen, what they're saying about the quality of Texas teachers. The demands on Texas teachers are so different than they were when I was a teacher. Yep. The level of sophistication that a teacher has to have in terms of the knowledge of curriculum and instruction. You know, when I started teaching, I went into a school, I was an elementary teacher, went in the middle of the year and to take over for a teacher who had retired. and my section leader gave me 2 teacher's editions for reading. And she said, basically what you do is you read all the stories in this book, you get to the end, there's a little quiz, and if they pass that, they're gonna go to the 4th grade. And I thought, wow, okay. You know, and so.
Just like it is now.
Yeah,
right?
and
yeah.
so
Exactly.
the requirements that teachers have to really know their standards, know their curriculum, to be able to be successful in this accountability system we have.
Right.
It's a whole different ball game, and I applaud them for being able to do that.
With regard, Mr. Greer, to the accountability system question, you know, the state's accountability system is much discussed, much debated, in some quarters much loathed, but there it is. There are ratings of every school district. To what degree do you think that the way we assess performance is the right way?
You know, I don't have the magic answer to that question. I do think that we assess way too much in Texas.
We do.
Now, our school board in Houston for years has had a national reputation for being accountability driven. We've used value-added test scores in Houston.
Right.
We have one of the country's finest, we believe, paper performance plans where a teacher can earn $13,000 a year bonuses for student academic growth. We're one of the only school districts in America that has a teacher evaluation system that's weighted 50% with student growth. And if you see what's happened in Chicago with teacher strikes,
right,
where they end up settling for a 20 or 30% of the evaluation. So we're big into accountability in Houston. But it's very difficult for me to believe that we have to test kids at the 2nd grade, the 3rd grade, the 4th grade, the 5th grade, the 6th grade, the 7th grade, and the 8th grade in 4 different subjects. And then you get to high school and you have to pass 15 end-of-course exams to say you are a high school graduate. Right. To me, it's excessive. We ought to be able to have enough bright people come together and sit and figure this out without one group jumping up and down and saying you're anti-accountability if you want to have a good, reasonable accountability system.
Right. Now, as a data point, let me just say the 4 districts here are part of the 77% of school districts in the state, representing 86% of the students in the state who have passed, the boards of those districts have passed anti-testing resolutions. So you are all part of that effort to push back against accountability.
We missed
that excessive
assessment.
And I want to understand exactly where the
line,
but I want to understand where the line is, Mr. Elliff. And let me go to Mr. Flores now.
So before you do that, students in Houston last year collectively missed about 65 days of the school year in testing.
As a result of testing.
As a result of testing. Yeah. And the other piece about this that just drives me absolutely crazy, I mean, I go crazy over this, is charter schools in Texas, and Houston is the birthplace of charter schools. If you don't know about KIPP and YES, Harmony Academy, they do a fantastic job. But they can start school whenever they want.
They're not subject to the same. And
so not at all. You can't believe the bureaucratic regulations that the state harnesses us with as public schools. And so they can start school whenever they want. We can't start school until the last Monday in August. But the state has a set date in which you must test kids. Yep. And it's usually 2 weeks before the end of the school year. Now, if we could move that test to end of the school year and have those 2 weeks more to prepare kids, or if we could move the beginning of the school year up 2 weeks to take advantage of, so we could actually have 180 days of instruction, I promise you it would make a big difference. But we don't have that option.
You don't have that latitude. No. Mr. Flores, Mr. Elliff makes a very good point that I intend to make as well, which is there's a difference between being opposed to accountability and being opposed to this accountability. Right. So would you help us understand along the continuum, what do you think is an appropriate place to go from an assessment of your performance?
I think Mr. Greer said a lot of good things with regards to multiple assessments. He refers to multiple assessments that possibly not every grade needs to be tested. He also, and I think the whole group has mentioned that the high stakes, the high stakes results of what is expected of students. I've yet to meet a single student at a single school in a single school district that has said, test me more. So what we look at is what is the right accountability, and he said it best. I think right now, just recently this week, TA announced 23 school districts, high performing schools consortium, that's actually going to tackle some of that. And I think that's going to be a great dialogue that needs to come forward, because again, it's something that we cannot continue to do to our kids. Accountability, you bet. Accountability by subgroup, you bet. I think that students of color, of ethnicities, have gained from an accountability system that says, where were you? Because I don't know if anyone was tracking what my progress was back in 1981. Right. But nonetheless, overdoing it is a whole different matter. For example, just a high stakes, if you think right now to be college ready and possibility of going to school, it's dependent upon these two students here. If they had to go back in this environment today, and they have to take level 3, they have to pass at level 3, the highest level of English 3 and Algebra 2. Failure to do that, they wouldn't be seated here today. Yep. I just don't think, I think there's multiple measures. That's why I don't think you can hang your hat on an SAT, ACT score. I'm a living example. I'm here seated at this side of the table, even though I scored 20 on an ACT. You know, that's quite, you know, so we can't have a test be that high stake where students go to school at grade 3 worried about what is going to happen during that day.
Ms. Rue.
You know, there's really two topics here. And we use them and interchangeably. Yeah. I think we misuse the difference between assessment of student learning and accountability. We are absolutely accountable to the parents in our community, the business leaders of our community, accountable to the state, our taxpayers of our state, yep. and the fact that we must teach children to be prepared for their future. There's a difference in my mind between being accountable and showing the people of our state that school districts across Texas, regardless of size or location, are moving in tandem, that our students, but not by nature of where you were born or where you go to school, are receiving a quality education. And I think that is a must, and that our legislature is absolutely on target to say, yep. That's our responsibility to give oversight and governance to how you spend tax dollars and educate our kids in Texas. Mm-hmm. That is not assessment of learning. There is an entirely different piece. Yep. Accountability test, which is one way of saying, where are you in Harlingen? Where are you in Northwest? That is a very broad macro picture across the board. Assessment for the learning comes from the feedback, it comes from the conferences with parents, yep. It comes from the programmatic checks for learning that we do as a district. I, as a superintendent, want to know that a child in any one of our 17 elementary schools is doing fine in 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. I don't particularly need to know his particular score. I need to know, are our schools okay with that? We mix these two things together and assume they are the same thing. People may not realize that our accountability assessment tests, when they come, and I don't think we should call them assessments at all, when our accountability test results come back to us, they come back after school is out. They in no way inform instruction during a school year. They are a governance check, and that's great.
And that's how it should be.
We should do that. Yeah. We don't need to do that for every student in every grade level and every year in order to determine whether or not as a state we're moving forward. And I'll give you an example, if you are familiar with NAEP and how that is structured.
For the benefit of the audience, explain.
National Assessment of Educational Progress. Mm-hmm. It is our national assessment. It's the piece that we use to compare our country with other industrialized countries and things such as PISA or TIMSS or the test of maths and sciences, and to make these ratings. Where do we fall on the industrialized nations' rankings? That assessment is actually no more than, if I remember my facts correctly, is no more than around 400,000 students nationwide. We draw huge inferences, generalizations,
from a very small sample,
and comparisons from that.
Yep.
And we hang our hat on them, and we either pound our chest or pound our head, one or the other, about what those results might be.
Book trips to Finland.
Exactly. So there is such a huge difference between accountability, which we owe our state, but there's a way to do it that does not, we don't need to do it like we're doing it now.
Let me give Mr. Elliff a chance to get in here. You know, the idea of giving every student the same test and trying to base the outcome having the outcome be the basis for a ranking or a rating. We know and have known forever that kids learn differently, and that what might be required for one kid is not the same, and the assessment is a hard thing to do if you're just cookie cutting across the board.
I think one of the unfortunate things about the reaction to school districts adopting this resolution about testing is that there has been a perception that's developed that school boards are saying we don't want accountability.
Right.
And that's why I said these are unbundled. I think they should be unbundled because, well, my dad was an ag teacher, and he would probably say, you know, you don't get better pork by weighing your pig every single day. And so that's what all of the tests, I mean, the excessive testing.
Somebody tweet that.
But my concern, and I think I can only speak for our community, is the notion that this test, one test, answers all the questions that everyone who holds us accountable as a district would have. You know, accountable to whom? In our district, we feel we're accountable. I think this test seems to answer the question of accountability to people who are controlling us remotely maybe from Austin.
Is TEA the problem, Mr. Ellen?
I don't think TEA is the problem. But I think that having a system that just says we're going to answer all the questions with one test, I can't get one business person in my community to ever get excited talking about the tax test. That doesn't answer their question about how well are you preparing our students in terms of work ethic, character, in addition to skills. Parents don't get excited about the tax test. Our higher education institutions, they want to know, are students college ready? I wonder, is the way to determine that to start trying to predict that when they're in the third grade? Or is the way for us to do that to put some effort into, at the policy level, to creating better ways of exchanging information between public ed and higher ed, so that when a student leaves my system and goes to another,
sync it up.
Yeah, is there a way that we can sync that up
Yep.
so that I can really directly answer the question, did I get these kids ready for college, rather than trying to say it based on what a third grader did in a math class one day in April.
If you could bail on the STAR test in your district, would you do it?
We wouldn't bail on the STAR test. We wouldn't bail on it. I don't think the STAR test is a bad thing. I just don't think we need to do so darn much of it to so many kids every single year.
Would you bail on the STAR test?
I would cull. I
cull.
would refine it.
Modify.
I would modify it to some sort of a stratified random sampling, or I would modify it to specific grade levels,
Right.
and keep it as a check and balance, and use assessment for learning
Yeah.
at our local level. And let me give this short little anecdote, just to understand the path we've been on. It's helping our kids understand standards that they must reach, that are rigorous and challenging. I was in a first grade classroom Tuesday, and I saw the teacher pat this little girl on the shoulder and say, go tell her, go tell her. And the child had her folder in her hand. She said, I want you to see my reading response journal. I said, well, great, tell me about it. She began to tell me about it. Then she flipped and she said, here are my goals. And I said, really? Really? And she said, well.
First grade.
First grade. Her name was Macy. And she said, I'm reading at level 12. And my teacher says I need to be reading at level 13 by the end of the year. But I'm already at level 12. I'll set a new goal. See, this is a 6-year-old little girl.
That's the way you do it.
Darling little squeaky voice,
Right.
telling me all about and pointing.
Yeah.
Level 12, level 16 is not that far away. I'm going to set a new goal.
Mr. Flores, would you get rid of the STAR test?
I think, again, some modifications, and then really begin some literacy checkpoints at grades 2, 5, and 8. Literacy checkpoints, not high standardized testing,
Yep.
it says, but to check to see, especially at grade 2, before they break for summer. Why do we need that literacy checkpoint? Because you can do some serious intervention. But again, that's going to cost money. You do that at grade 5, because then the middle school transition, you do that at grade 8. And then the focus on grade 9 and credit accumulation that first year. I'm glad to say that we are designing a high school next year that'll open as a 9th grade academy with 5 schools. One of education business, I won't go through all 5, but what it's designed to do is for every student to know what it is to be certificated, to associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, or a doctorate. But it's a choice that they have, and they'll have that connection. So again, those are the things that I would add to the modifications to STAR.
Mr. Greer, I know you're trying to get in here. What do you think about the STAR test, and what's the way forward on this?
I wouldn't abandon it. I wouldn't try to
So
water
4
it down.
superintendents would not abandon the STAR
No,
test. Very
as a matter of fact, the big issue I had with TEA this year is how they are, how they're phasing in and changing the number of questions you need to get right over time. I would have just come right in and said, here it is.
Wham, that's it.
Wham, here it is. And everyone would know. Now, I think we test too much at the high school. 15 end-of-course exams is excessive. Now, one of the issues that I have big time with the state is this whole issue of we don't have the flexibility. I think our state, we ought to have additional funding for the 15% of our lowest performing students, regardless of where they may live. In the schools that we've turned around in Houston, those kids in those schools come to school 2 extra weeks, and they go to school an extra day, an extra hour during the school day.
Yep.
We have hired tutors. We tutor all 6th and 9th graders in those middle schools and high schools. 1 tutor per 2 children in math every day for 70 minutes. If you are lower in reading or math, you have an extra period of reading and math. This year in Houston in grades 6 and 9 mandated, which in site-based decision making, like we're in, that's not a real friendly word, but we mandated that all middle schools and high schools actually teach a reading class to students that are below grade level in reading. We need to have the flexibility to have a different kind of school calendar for some of our students. The summer slide, the summer loss for kids in my place where we're 64% Hispanic and a lot of our kids don't speak English as a first language, but when they go home in the summer, what do they hear spoken at home? What do they hear on the radio? What do they hear on television? What do they hear when they go to church? We have too long of a period in the summer where we have little or no impact on those children's education.
Yep.
And so we have to have more flexibility if we're going to get serious about educating all children and educating them well. Right. And I'm not saying, look, I understand the entertainment business in Houston and all around Texas and Six Flags and down at the beach and everything. But the lowest 15% of my kids, they're not going to work in the entertainment business. They don't go on vacation. You know, they live right there in Houston, and we need to have the flexibility to provide a different type of educational experience for our most needy children. And we need the funds to support that.
Mr. Flores, the idea of reducing mandates from the state appeals to you as well?
It sure does. Yes, sir, it does. I think, again, and I was going to interject when Terry's passionate plea about the testing, and one of the things that I think we need to understand is that the parents have awoken. The 9th grade, if you have a parent who's a 9th grader right now, or you're a parent of a child who's in the 9th or 10th grade, you're the one who knows that these are 15 tests at the end of it. So again, I think that what we've got to do is make sure that, again, and I know that my colleagues have done it much more gracefully than I have, but we're not anti-accountability. In fact, accountability is good. The right dose of accountability.
Just real quick, I got to tell you this just real quick. This year we had over 1,500 kids not show back up in our high schools in Houston that were supposed to show back up.
Yep.
Over 500 of those children failed 3 or more end-of-course exams last year.
And you think that was the reason they didn't come back?
I think they've given up hope already.
Well, it's a good transition to the thing I wanted to ask next, which is about the dropout problem. One or more of you referred to the progress you've made or the lack thereof in confronting the dropout problem. It has been a problem that is ever thus and ever will be. There's a lot of disagreement about what the actual numbers are. Are the numbers that we're being told about the dropout rate statewide actually the numbers? I wonder if each of you would talk a little bit about your own efforts, beginning with Mr. Elliff, to combat the dropout problem, which, as we know, is a huge bump in the road on the way to getting kids off to college and launched into the world.
Right. When I became superintendent in our district, we had a lot of great intentions that were poorly coordinated. And so we actually brought people together to create what we call our Office of High School Completion. We didn't want to have the dropout prevention. We wanted it to be the Office of High School Completion. And there are very, very specific case management techniques we use with students who are seriously at risk. Probably the biggest impact that we've had in reducing the dropout rate is by getting community members to go hit the streets with us in September and bring our students back into school through
Literally go to the kids.
Yes, we have we send out about 400 volunteers. We just did it a couple of weeks ago. We've reduced our annual dropout rate by 50%.
50%.
Yeah, we brought 1,700 students back into school,
Yep.
and over the last 3 years that had dropped out, dropped in, dropped out, dropped in, dropped out for one reason or the other. But I think it's also helped our community, and then we provide them with options. That's the other thing, is
Yep.
that you can't bring them back into the system that is exactly what they left, because obviously there was something that was not meeting their need, or there
Yep.
was an impediment. But it's also been great to get people in our community out to see how our students live. You know, I think in many of our cities, I think there's probably a lot of nostalgia, you know, which is a combination of nostalgia and amnesia about what school's really about. And I didn't pick that up. That's Jamie Vollmer's term, but I think it's great. And so there's a sort of a prevailing wisdom that kids just drop out of school because they're lazy. And when we get people in our community to go out and see where our students are really living and what they're really living, and seeing the challenges that they have just getting to school every day, that's been helpful in building an awareness in our community about what our students are facing, particularly students.
I might use amnalgia, actually, as opposed to nostalgia.
Nostalgia, right.
Ms. Rue, how about the dropout problem in your district? What have you been doing to combat it?
Well, we do much of the same.
Yeah.
We have counselors who are just making tremendous connections with kids.
Yep.
One of the pieces that is important to us is the connection we have with communities and schools. They are caseworkers who stay with us. We make sure that that's one of those priority fundings we do, because of what they're able to do to help a student all the way throughout the course of their years.
Yep.
We do that. We've got programs for them to step into that are different than the ones they stepped out of. I think there's a lot that is very similar across the state.
Yeah.
One of the concerns I have is what I see as a potential for a much bigger dropout problem than we currently have.
Why is that?
Under our tax system, the exit test mattered. You didn't pass that exit test, you didn't graduate. A student who went through a growth period, a learning period, 9th and 10th grade, they may or may not have passed that tax test, but they had opportunity for a lot of intervention, a lot of just self-determination. I'm going to take this summer class, I'm going to work after school, I'm going to come to the 0 hour, I'm going to work, I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But by 11th grade, I get this chance. Right now, the way the system is set, the way it's designed under EOCs, if a student does not make a minimum standard on that 9th grade assessment, then they do not get credit for having passed that. Each one of those amounts to 1/3 of a cumulative in order to graduate. It is entirely likely. Those kids are always there. We've got roughly 200 kids right now who do not have that minimum they need at 9th grade. They haven't accrued that first third.
Yep.
They were always there.
Yeah.
They were always there, but by 11th,
But they always had a different place
but by
that they could
11th
go
grade,
to. Right?
they
Yeah.
had a chance to get there.
Right.
Now they've got a third carved off. What happens in 10th grade?
Right.
We're going to find kids who say, I can't get there now. I can't do
So I'm
it
going
now.
to give up.
Yeah.
Right. I'm hearing Mr. Flores from Mr. Elliff and Ms. Rue. We need to involve the business community. We need to involve communities and schools. It's a problem you can't solve on your own, this dropout problem.
That's right.
So what are you doing to combat it?
You know, again, one of the things, the first Rotary meeting that I went to in Harlingen, they asked, this gentleman he was armed, he had multiple data sets and different variants on the dropout rate. But I knew he had that information, I was fine with that, but I said, you know, by definition, one dropout is one too many. So when you look at it from that standpoint, it really it takes a total effort to say, what do we do differently? Well, one of the things that we can do is 9th grade. A lot of times when we're seated, and I think there are a lot of educators who understand education here, so this is preaching to the choir. But when we think about a dropout, most people think, oh, they just dropped out at 12th grade.
Yep.
No, they dropped out at 12th grade age, but 9th grade credit accumulation or lack thereof. Mm-hmm. Thus, what we've done in Harlingen, and for 4 years, and we've tracked it from 22% my first year to 6%, and I'm not proud of the 6%, we're still working on that. But what we do is 8th grade, at the completion of the 8th grade year, we run the report by quartile. And what you'll find, and we mirrored this off Chicago, the Chicago study speaks very clearly to the fact that the fourth quartile, you think their chances to graduate is 50%, that's high. It's less than 10. Right. So what do? You identify that fourth quartile in our district, and we call it ninth grade success. And we meet with them periodically. We go through that. Right. We hand
so it's
schedule.
a proactive effort.
Yes, sir. And it's gone from 22 to 6%. And what we need to know is that by the end result, if a student, and I go to ninth grade, I personally go to the campuses myself and tell the ninth graders, it's about credit accumulation, yep. It's about class rank, and it's about a number. When at the end of the year, where are you, top 10%, 20%, what will your number be? They understand that, and we give them a card at the end of that presentation. So what does that all mean? That all means that we're all in this together, but that's why, again, collective impact. No longer can we just say I don't just own, even though it's our problem, it's everyone's problem. It's the business, it's everyone involved for the sake and betterment of that child, especially in the Rio Grande Valley, where if you haven't heard Richard Murdoch's demography report, I think everyone in here probably has. But if we're not successful there, then where will there be success 20 years from now? So
now again, Mr. Greer, everything is bigger in Houston, so I assume your dropout problem is bigger too?
Well, in 2007, it was 22.8%. It's 11.5% now.
Well, how did you cut it in half? What'd you do?
So
what works?
we did some interesting things. We did some things when I got there that we thought were short-term that we hope to work out of, but we also have done some things that we think will impact long-term. We started 7 Twilight High Schools where
Twilight High Schools?
Twilight High Schools.
Meaning what?
You can go to school from 4:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 8, 9 o'clock at night, 4 days a week and Saturday morning. We implemented a program in all of our high schools where we purchased a portable laptop lab for each high school. Yep. Out of the central office, we hired what we call a graduation coach. We handpicked people that were empathetic. The grad labs, as we call them, students can go in and sit down at a laptop computer if you failed biology. You can go online and take a test. It's aligned to our Texas standards. And it'll basically tell you this is what you mastered, this is what you failed, and then it designs a program specifically for you. Yep. And in an average about 65 days, you can do a credit recovery. And then you can test, and the teachers stand and watch you take the test. We recovered 9,000 courses in Houston last year that kids had previously taken and failed, versus sitting there again with the same teacher for 180 days that failed you the last time, using the same book and doing the same lecture, and this was a different way.
Now you're satisfied, Mr. Greer, the criticism of those credit recovery programs is occasionally that the work required of these students is not as rigorous as what was required when they failed the first time.
The same program, we offered 900 advanced placement courses online last year in Houston. Right. And our kids who took the online AP courses had a higher pass rate on the AP exam than the ones taught by teachers. And
sat in the classroom.
Yeah, and our teachers are great AP teachers, so this is no slam on our teachers. Other things we did is we created a program we called High School Ahead. We found we had 3,000 middle school kids that were 2, 3, 4 years older than their peer groups in school. I mean, it's like having kids driving cars in middle school or shaving in middle school. I mean, you think I'm kidding you, it was pretty bad. And so we implemented an accelerated learning program in the middle school grades so that particularly for children coming into the 7th grade, they get 2 periods of reading, 2 periods of math, and an elective each day. Handpicked really teachers who teach like their hair's on fire. A lot of Teach for America teachers working with these kids. And in the middle of the year, we assess them, and if they've missed less than 4 days during the first semester and they behave themselves, we promote them to the 8th grade. Same teacher keeps them. We just keep accelerating their learning. At the end of the year, we move them into the 9th grade. Then in summer school, we try to get them at least 1, maybe 2 units of high school credit in the summer, getting them prepared to move and catch them back up. Right. At the elementary level, to try to do things more long-term. Also at the high school level, one of the things that research tells us is that 9th grade attendance is really a huge predictor of graduation rates. Indeed. So we've started attendance incentive programs for 9th graders, particularly 9th graders who had trouble with attendance as 8th grade. And so we do it school by school. Then in the elementary schools, we have found several things. Kids who can't read on grade level in the 3rd grade have a higher propensity to drop out of school. Research tells us that. So this last 2 years, we've trained all of our kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade teachers in a 5-day reading training program. One of the things we find is that our teachers come out of college not knowing how to teach children with limited vocabulary how to read. So that's huge. And then finally, what we're doing at the elementary school level is we're pushing the research fact with our principals that students who are retained, held back 2 or more times between kindergarten and 8th grade, there's over an 85% chance they won't graduate from high school. So we're not in favor of social promotion, but what we want to know is if you're going to hold that kid back the 2nd time, what have you done before you made that decision?
And at what cost do you make that decision going forward? Right.
So there's some long-term things and short-term things we have done in Houston.